I, 32M, am unreasonably upset by my wife's, 35F, decision to get another IUD. I, 32M, am a consummate optimist, and my wife, 35F, is a consummate realist. I assume everything will work out for the best barring any extreme, unforeseen circumstances. She assumes everything will fall apart without constant vigilance. This is a frequent point of contention in our relationship, as she commonly sees me as naive and unprepared, and I see her as a doomsayer unwilling to take chances. At the same time, we balance each other out on most things. Her cautiousness about disrupting our current stability prevents me from making rash decisions, and my conviction to a bright future prevents her from stagnating. My wife and I had a pregnancy scare 8 years ago when we were first dating. She got an IUD, which I fully supported, as neither of us were at all prepared to raise a child at that time. 8 years later, the IUD is reaching end of life. We've been married for 4 years. Together we make over double what we made back then. And we have a very nice house in a good area. We talk about kids semi-frequently, throwing out names, sharing traditions, hobbies, parenting styles, etc. But my wife has always been maybe 1020% sure she wants kids compared to my 7080%. When I look at our future objectively, it's my wife and I versus the world. I do most of the retirement planning for us, and these forecasts have never included anything related to children. That being said, we are financially secure enough that a child would not significantly impact any of our plans, as our finances are good and we have a strong family support network. We are mostly coasting through our 30s. And I always pictured it like, one day my wife rolls over in bed and says, "Let's have a baby," and we start trying and taking tests. And it's a beautiful romantic journey we decide to begin together if, when the moment feels right. My wife was concerned about the removal and insertion of a new IUD being painful, and she doesn't want to have to remember to take a pill. I've been following developments around male contraceptive pills, injections for years, but nothing has hit the general market yet, as far as I am aware. So I suggested NuvaRing or the Nexplanon arm implant. I also said I'd go back to condoms if she was uncomfortable with the options available to her. After talking to her doctor, she decided she was most likely going to get another IUD. I had an extreme overreaction that I didn't anticipate and which was very out of character for me. I got upset and told her that 8 more years of semi-permanent birth control would mean we most likely would never end up having kids, because having 2+ doctor visits, consultation and removal procedure at the very least, between us and a pregnancy would mean it could never be spontaneous, romantic. She said she was never sure she wanted kids, so that's fine by her. But I'm not ready to commit to not having kids because, well, there are plenty of things my wife said she'd never do that she's now happy to have done. International travel, house projects, etc. We have not been able to reconcile these feelings. And every time we talk I get more emotional about it than I expect, and she's usually left in tears. I know I'm an asshole for putting any pressure at all on my wife about her body. I like to think of myself as a rational person, but I know I'm being incredibly irrational, because even as I write this I can feel myself trying to spin it, and I hate it. I'm hoping to get some perspective from the members of our relationship advice to help me understand why I feel this way. Edit. Numerous people have commented that my wife obviously does not want kids, based on the 1020% confidence level. I would hope that my wife would be honest with me if she was 100% sure she did not want kids. But I can't deny that it seems that way based on how our conversations have ended most of the time. The next conversation we have must end with a firm yes, no. Dude, she's 35. Her actions are saying she doesn't want children. That's the conversation you need to have. Discussing whether or not you want to have kids is one of the most important conversations you can have before you get married. You're fully aware that she was only 1020% on having kids? What did you think you could just change her mind? You can't force her to want children. Then on top of that, what if you do have kids and it's not the life she wanted? She's going to resent you and possibly have it affect the children as well. You two are not aligned on kids. If you want them, you're going to have to find yourself a partner who also wants children. House projects and international travel aren't the same as having a baby. This is something you should have talked about long ago. Instead, you created a rom-com scenario in your head about someone that's been lukewarm at best about the thought of having kids. Just because you think you can afford a kid, it doesn't mean she'll ever want to put her body through a pregnancy or spend the rest of her life being a parent. You're not upset about the IUD. Let me translate your own post for you. Her being 1020% sure she wants children, and you being 70% means she doesn't want any. Your complete overreaction to her wishing to go on a birth control method that, while yes, quite invasive, is not permanent and can be removed, shows you want children 100% and you want them now. Also, deciding on having children will and should never be spontaneous. You're completely unrealistically romanticizing the idea of your partner out of the blue being like, yes, now it's time. Knock me up. It will never happen like that. You're delusional if you think that's how this works. She doesn't want children. You do, and you're getting impatient. Children aren't a compromising ground. You guys should seriously talk it out if this relationship has a future. Based off your comments, you want to have a child accidentally and spontaneously, because that's how it happens in the movies. Dude, someone needs to give you a serious reality check. Not only on the movie aspect, but on what it's really like to have kids. About your wife's desire for them. Spoiler, it's not even 10%. And just life in general. I'm glad you at least realize you've been naive. But now you have to actually do something with this revelation. And it's not to get pissy at your wife for her choice of contraception. Having a baby isn't just some romantic rose-colored experience. If you can't fathom having 2 doctor's visits before trying to have a baby, wait till you find out what the rest of pregnancy and birth entails. Your wife doesn't really want kids. If something happened to you, she would have to raise them alone. No one should have kids if they can't guarantee they'd do that well. The bottom line here is that it's her body that has to do all the heavy lifting in having a baby. It's up to her if she wants to do that or not. If your main reason for being in a relationship with her is to be a father, then you have some things to contemplate. Honestly, this is what you get for jumping into a lifelong commitment without getting the kids topic figured out. Your lack of prepping is now coming to a head, and you're reaping the consequences. I think it's wildly irresponsible to have a kid spontaneously. Why that's something you want is beyond me. That said, you've always known your wife most likely didn't want kids. You know, if it's a 10-20% chance she does, then it's an 8,090% chance she doesn't. This choosing at age 35 an IUD that works for 8 years is her saying she doesn't want kids. I'm sorry, but that's what this seems to be. Maybe she was uncertain at one point, but she no longer is, it seems. Time for some soul searching. If you truly, genuinely, really want kids, and not the romanticized version you have in your head, don't forget that it will be messy, loud, difficult, and expensive. Then you need to have that conversation with your wife, knowing it will most probably lead to a separation. If you're fine with no kids, then she gets her IUD. But for God's sake, don't secretly resent her for it. It'll destroy your relationship. Either drop it, or talk to her and take your chances. You spent so much time writing these eloquently worded paragraphs, and you could have used some of that energy to just have an honest conversation with your wife about whether or not you will have kids together. Have you done that at all? Getting happily pregnant isn't a spontaneous, romantic thing. It requires mutual consent and planning ahead. If you aren't having these talks with your wife and making plans, you're not going to get pregnant. And you shouldn't have had any expectations around whether or not she's going to go on birth control again. Wow. You guys should have figured this out before you got married. It sounds like she doesn't want kids and is telling you 1020% just to avoid a hard conversation. You didn't listen to your wife to begin with when she told you she was not likely to want to have children. 10-20% is hovering on that not likely to want kids. And just assumed she would change her mind. That's just the expectation people have about women. And that's really unfortunate that you didn't listen to her and didn't take that seriously to begin with, and entered into marriage understanding that there was a probability you would not have kids. Because now you're constantly making her cry in addition to basically betraying her. Ultimately, it is the woman's decision whether or not to have kids because it's the woman's body that has to change and accommodate a baby. And if she ultimately says it's not likely, then you need to listen to that and be okay with it. And this is what men need to understand when it comes to having children. If there is ever a doubt that your partner wants children, then make sure you're okay with not having them. At the very least, stop bringing it up and making her cry. She did nothing wrong. She didn't change her mind. She was clear from the start, and you entered into the marriage knowing she did not likely want children. And at the age of 35, it only gets more difficult for women and their bodies. So she's probably more at a 15% at this point. So you can either get over it, since you should have listened in the first place, or you can choose to throw away what you have with your life for the possibility of maybe finding a partner that would want to have children with you. But stop guilting her over this. You're the one who is wrong here. The more I read the post and your comments, the more I agree with your wife. You're naive, bordering on the verge of stupid, and unprepared. You're romanticizing the act of having a baby. Having a baby is not the way you make it seem. Yes, it's exciting and the act of trying is fun, but it's also scary. Not knowing if the pregnancy will make it through the first trimester, if it'll be a low-risk pregnancy, praying everything is okay on ultrasounds. Your wife has been unclear about kids from the start, and it sounds like you just want the fun and romantic excitement of trying. I deeply rethink why you want a kid and if parenting is something you're willing to do for the rest of your life. You say your wife is 10-20% sure she wants kids. That means she's 8,090% sure she doesn't want kids. It doesn't sound like you two want the same things children. And unfortunately, it's the one issue for which compromise is impossible. I don't see any way to resolve this. I can't get past you referring to the IUD as semi-permanent birth control, and yet you're recommending that she get Nexplanon, which is checks notes semi-permanent birth control. You want her to be left with a scar from insertion and removal for the rest of her life, just so you can continue to have the hope of your rom-com ending? Two things. 1. She most likely won't want kids. If she is still unsure, she can freeze her eggs or search for other alternatives in case she changes her mind. But this is something you should discuss now. You want them, and she made it clear that she most likely won't. Are you okay with that? A pregnancy would mean it could never be spontaneous, romantic. 2. Most pregnancies aren't like that, because this is a serious decision people need to make. This should be considered thoroughly before even trying for the baby. To a lot of people, a spontaneous baby isn't something romantic. It's a nightmare. Planning gives people reassurance and a calmer pregnancy. At 35 years old, if she's not 100% sure she wants kids, she probably just doesn't. You need to calmly have that talk. If this is a deal breaker for you, then you probably need to rethink this next stage of your life. Would you stay with your wife if she never wants to have children? I think you have your answer there. Until you can go through pregnancy and then birth a beach ball through your vagina, I think you should back off, because it's pretty obvious your wife doesn't want children. She's 35. You are at the do it or it's not happening stage. All your thoughts about it are fantasy. You either choose someone that wants kids or you are never having them.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Ericast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.